Right now, you can look up a flight, tap a screen, and be standing on a beach in Australia by tomorrow. You know it's there. You've seen it on every map you've ever owned. But 65,000 years ago, nobody knew it existed. There was no map. There was no rumor. There was only open water, stretching past the edge of everything a human being had ever seen. And somehow, your ancestors got in a boat anyway. That sentence should stop you. Think about what it actually requires. Not curiosity, not bravery. A level of planning, cooperation, and technology that most people assume didn't exist until thousands of years later. But it did, and the story of how humans found Australia rewrites almost everything you were taught about primitive people. Start with the map in your head. Southeast Asia and Australia look close together. They're not close together in the way that matters. During the last ice age, sea levels were far lower than today, low enough to connect many islands into two enormous landmasses. Archaeologists call them Sunda and Sahul. Sunda included mainland Southeast Asia, Sumatra, Java, and Borneo, all fused into one continuous stretch of land. Sahul included Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania, also fused into one. You could walk across most of it, not all of it. Between Sunda and Sahul sat a scatter of islands called Wallacea, named after the naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace, who noticed something strange in the 1800s. Animals on one side of this island chain looked completely different from animals on the other side. Elephants and tigers on one side, marsupials and giant flightless birds on the other. Something had kept them apart for millions of years. That something was water. Deep, permanent, never-freezing water, even at the height of an ice age. This is the part your textbooks tend to gloss over. To get from Sunda to Sahul, a human being had to cross open ocean, not a narrow river, not a shallow strait you could wade through at low tide. Open ocean, with the far shore invisible for most of the journey. Modern estimates put the shortest, unavoidable crossing at somewhere around 90 kilometers of water with no land in sight the whole way. Imagine standing on a beach, looking at nothing but horizon, and deciding to get in a raft anyway. Who would do that? And how many times did it go wrong before it went right? This is where the science gets specific. In 2017, archaeologist Chris Clarkson and his team published findings from a rock shelter in northern Australia called Majed Bebe. They dug down through layer after layer of sediment and found stone tools, ground ochre, and grinding stones dating back roughly 65,000 years. That date shocked a lot of researchers. It pushed the arrival of humans in Australia back further than almost anyone expected, and it meant people were living there while parts of Europe still had no modern human presence at all. 65,000 years. Pause on that. Agriculture wouldn't exist for another 55,000 years. Writing wouldn't exist for another 60,000. And yet, somewhere in that deep stretch of time, a group of people built something that could float, loaded it with enough people to start a new population, and pushed off from a coast they would never see again. You have to ask what kind of boat that was. Nobody has found one. Wood and fiber rot away long before tens of thousands of years pass, so there's no ancient hull sitting in a museum. But archaeologists like Sue O'Connor, who has spent decades excavating early sites in Timor, have found something almost as convincing, evidence of deep-sea fishing from that same era. Bones of tuna and other pelagic fish, the kind that only live far from shore, show up in coastal sites dated to over 40,000 years ago. You don't catch open ocean fish by wading into the shallows. You catch them from something that floats, something steered, something built with intention. So picture it, bamboo rafts, or dugout canoes, or lashed logs, built by people who understood currents, who watched birds fly out to sea and return, who noticed smoke or cloud formations that hinted at land beyond the horizon. None of this was luck. Crossing open water on purpose, with people and supplies aboard, is navigation. It's planning for a multi-day trip with no guarantee of finding anything on the other side. It's one of the earliest known acts of deliberate, engineered exploration in human history, and it happened tens of thousands of years before anyone would think to call it that. Here's where the story gets even stranger. This wasn't a one-time accident. Genetic research led by Eske Willerslev, who sequenced the genome of an Aboriginal Australian using a century-old hair sample, found that Aboriginal Australian ancestry split off from other non-African populations roughly 50,000 to 70,000 years ago, and it stayed remarkably continuous from that point forward. That means the people who crossed into Sahul didn't just arrive once and get absorbed by later waves of migration the way many other regions were. They arrived, they settled, and their descendants stayed connected to that same lineage for tens of thousands of years, making Aboriginal Australian culture one of the oldest continuous cultures on Earth. Think about what that means. While ice sheets in Europe advanced and retreated, while entire species of megafauna rose and vanished, while the last Neanderthals lived out their final generations, the descendants of that first ocean crossing were still there. Still in Sahul, still passing down knowledge, language, and connection to land that had begun with a voyage nobody today can fully reconstruct, and once they arrived, the land itself was nothing like a safe reward for the journey. Sahul in that era had giant kangaroos twice the height of a person, marsupial lions with retractable claws, and flightless birds bigger than an ostrich. The first humans to step onto that coast weren't just first to see a new landmass, they were first to encounter an entire ecosystem that had evolved in total isolation, full of animals with no instinctive fear of a two-legged predator. Every hunt was an experiment. Every unfamiliar sound at night was an unknown. There was no accumulated knowledge to draw on, no elders who had already learned which plants were poisonous or which predators to avoid. That knowledge had to be built from nothing, on the fly, by the first few generations who made it across. So why does any of this matter to you, sitting comfortably tens of thousands of years later? Because the instincts that got them across that water are still sitting inside you. The impulse to explore past the edge of what you can see, the willingness to build something risky, because staying put feels worse than the unknown. The drive to solve a problem with the materials in front of you, because nobody is coming to hand you a solution. You inherited that. Every time you take a leap without a guarantee, you're running the same basic software that got a small group of people onto rafts, staring at open water, and choosing to go anyway. You'll never have to cross 90 kilometers of ocean with no land in sight to prove it works. But somewhere in your instinct to keep going when the outcome isn't certain, there's an echo of that decision made by people whose names are lost, on a coastline that no longer exists, in a world that had no idea Australia was even there to be found. And maybe that's the real answer. It's not that ancient humans got lucky, it's that they were exactly capable enough, exactly curious enough, and exactly stubborn enough to do something that still sounds impossible today. Right now, you can look up a flight and be standing on that same coastline by tomorrow, but the first person to stand there didn't know it existed at all. They just kept paddling.